The galaxy marked Earth as a graveyard until 8 billion ghosts lit beacons. That couldn't be ignored, and humanity proved that extinction is just another challenge to overcome. The galaxy had forgotten us. That's what Ambassador Kelther would later say when the historians asked him about first contact. But he was wrong about one thing: they hadn't forgotten humanity. You can't forget something you believe never existed in the first place. For 3,000 years, Earth had been silent. Not the comfortable silence of a civilization choosing isolation, but the terrible silence of a world that had been scoured clean. The Galactic Council's records were clear, stamped with the authority of a dozen ancient species who had surveyed our solar system. In what we would have called the year 2147, their instruments had been thorough. Earth's atmosphere, toxic. Surface temperature, incompatible with carbon-based life. Radiation levels, catastrophic. The official designation was Graveworld Category 5. No survivors. No artifacts worth salvaging. Just another casualty of the great filter that claimed 9 out of 10 emerging civilizations before they could reach the stars. The survey team had even found evidence of our existence: fragments of satellites in decaying orbits, the geometric scars of ancient cities visible from orbit, the lingering chemical signatures of industrial civilization in the geological record. They had filed their report with the casual efficiency of undertakers, noted the probable cause of extinction as self-inflicted nuclear and environmental collapse, and moved on. Why wouldn't they? The galaxy had seen it 1,000 times before. But here's what they didn't know: humanity doesn't die easily. We're stubborn in ways that would horrify more sensible species. When the world burned, when the bombs fell and the climate spiraled into chaos that made Venus look hospitable, when 99% of us died in the space of a single generation, the remaining 1% looked at the hellscape we'd created and said, "Well, let's get to work." They went underground, not metaphorically, literally beneath the earth, into caverns, natural and artificial, into mines that went miles deep, into bunkers that became cities, that became entire civilizations lit by fusion reactors and fed by hydroponic gardens. They brought what they could save: books, art, music, seeds, genetic databases, the accumulated knowledge of 10,000 years of human civilization. And they waited. The plan was always to return to the surface, just later, after the radiation faded, after the storms calmed, after Earth healed herself the way she'd done a dozen times before across geological epochs. Our ancestors were patient because they had no choice. They raised children who raised children who raised children, each generation knowing they were the bridge between the world that was and the world that would be again. It took us 800 years, 8 centuries of living like moles, of recycling every drop of water and every breath of air, of maintaining machines we could barely remember how to build, of keeping the faith that someday we would see actual sunlight again, instead of the pale imitation our UV lamps provided. And when we finally emerged, blinking and shielding our eyes against a sun our bodies had almost forgotten, we found an Earth that had moved on without us. The cities were gone, reclaimed by forests that had evolved in our absence. The oceans had risen and fallen and risen again, redrawing coastlines that existed in no map we remembered. New species had evolved to fill the niches we'd emptied. Earth didn't care that we were back. She'd been fine without us. But we had learned our lesson. The second time around, humanity was different. We built carefully. We used the technologies we'd preserved and perfected: underground clean fusion, closed-loop ecosystems, weather management that healed instead of harmed. We kept our numbers sustainable. We remembered what hubris had cost us, and we swore by every god humanity had ever imagined that we would never forget. That we rebuilt slowly, not the sprawling metropolises of old Earth, but distributed communities that lived with the planet instead of on it. We restored species from genetic banks, pieced together ecosystems like archaeologists reconstructing pottery from fragments. We planted forests and cleaned oceans and gradually, carefully, became part of Earth's story again instead of a blight upon it. And while we healed our world, we looked up at the stars and wondered. We knew from the records we'd preserved that we'd detected radio signals before the fall, evidence of other civilizations out there in the cosmic dark. We knew we weren't alone, But we also knew we weren't ready, not yet. First, we had to prove we could survive ourselves. That took another 700 years. By the time we were ready to reach for the stars again, 1,500 years had passed since the fall. Everyone who remembered old Earth was 40 generations dead. The traumas that had driven us underground were ancient history, studied with the same academic distance that we once applied to the fall of Rome or the Bronze Age collapse. We were a new humanity, tempered by catastrophe and reforged in the depths. We knew what we were capable of, both the heights of our glory and the depths of our folly, and we were ready to introduce ourselves to the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the control room of Relay Station Olympus, positioned at Earth's L5 Lagrange point, and watched the culmination of 12 years of her life's work. Around her, 36 technicians monitored systems that represented the cutting edge of human engineering, or at least, the cutting edge of engineering that used only the resources of a single solar system. Power levels? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. 97% and climbing, responded Marcus Thompson, her chief engineer. Fusion reactors are purring like kittens. Well, kittens that contain the power of small stars, but you get the idea. Antenna array, fully deployed. All 3,000 elements are aligned and responding with intolerance. That was Yuki Tanaka, whose family had been optimizing radio telescope designs for 6 generations. We're about to paint a picture on the galaxy that'll be visible from 5,000 light-years away. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Beacon Network had been humanity's most ambitious project since the return to the surface. 17 relay stations positioned throughout the solar system, each one a marvel of engineering that could transmit a focused signal with enough power to punch through the cosmic background noise and announce, in no uncertain terms, "We're here. We made it. We're ready to join you." The message itself had been debated for years. What do you say to civilizations that might be millions of years old? How do you introduce yourself to a galaxy you know nothing about? In the end, they'd kept it simple. Mathematical proofs to show intelligence, chemical signatures to indicate carbon-based biology, a star map to show our location, and a single sentence translated into symbolic logic: "We come in peace." Seeking knowledge and friendship, naive? Maybe. But humanity had learned something important during our long exile. Peace and cooperation weren't weakness. They were the only things that let civilizations survive their own success. "All stations report ready," said Commander Okoye from her position at the communications hub. 16 lights glowed green on her board, each one representing a relay station from Mercury's sun-scorched orbit to the ice world facilities beyond Neptune. "We're synchronized and waiting for your mark, Director." Sarah took a deep breath. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a voice whispered warnings. What if hostile civilizations heard them? What if they attracted something terrible? What if the silence of the cosmos was a warning they were about to ignore? But humanity hadn't crawled out of the darkness just to hide in fear. We'd faced extinction and survived. Whatever was out there, we would face it standing tall. "Activate the Beacon Network," Sarah commanded. "Let's light up the galaxy." Across the solar system, fusion reactors surged. Magnetic fields aligned with precision that would have seemed like magic to the humans who had walked old Earth. 17 focused beams of radio energy lanced out into the cosmos, each one carrying humanity's first intentional message to the stars. In over 3,000 years, and the galaxy heard us. The first response came 6 days later, far sooner than anyone had expected. Sarah was in her quarters, reviewing logistics reports and trying to convince herself that the knot in her stomach was excitement rather than dread when the alert chimed. She was moving before conscious thought caught up, her body responding to years of drills and preparation. The control room was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Every station was occupied, every screen filled with data that made her heart race. "Talk to me," she said, scanning the displays. Commander Okoye looked up, and Sarah saw something in her eyes she'd never seen before: genuine wonder. "We're receiving a response. Multiple responses, actually. 27 distinct sources, all within 500 light-years." "That's impossible," Marcus breathed. "Even if someone was listening at exactly the right frequency when our signal reached them." and responded immediately, "We shouldn't be getting anything back for years. The nearest star system alone is for light years away, unless," Yuki said slowly, "they weren't responding to our beacon. Unless they were already broadcasting, and we just couldn't hear them before." Sarah felt the implications crash over her like a wave. "Show me the signals." The main display lit up with what looked like a forest of spectral lines, each one representing a transmission. Some were simple, repeating pulses. Others were dense with information, complex modulations that spoke of sophisticated technology. And all of them had been there, filling the cosmos with chatter, while humanity had huddled in silence below the Earth. "They're using frequencies we avoided during Reconstruction," Sarah realized. "The bands we classified as potentially contaminated from old Earth's industrial noise. We've been deaf to them this whole time because we were trying not to interfere with our own past." "There's more," Okoye said quietly. She highlighted one signal, and Sarah's breath caught. Unlike the others, this one was clearly responding to their beacon. The mathematical proofs they'd sent were being echoed back, confirmed, and then extended with theorems that made her head spin. "Someone heard us," Marcus whispered. "Someone actually heard us, and they're talking back." The signal continued, and their translation algorithms, primitive things cobbled together from first principles, since they'd had nothing to base them on, began attempting to process the incoming data. It was like watching a child learn to read, letter by letter, painfully assembling meaning from chaos. But eventually, a message emerged, simple, direct, and utterly terrifying. "Unknown species. Identify origin system. You are transmitting from designated Graveworld Terra 3. Explain immediately." The control room went silent. Sarah felt her blood turn to ice as the implications sank in. They knew about Earth. They had surveyed it, and they had marked it as dead. "Oh God," Yuki breathed. "They think we're, what? Squatters? Scavengers picking through humanity's corpse? Or something worse," Marcus added. "What if they think we're the ones who killed off the original inhabitants?" Sarah's mind raced. This was first contact, but not at all how they'd imagined it. Humanity was about to reintroduce itself to a galaxy that had written our obituary. 3,000 years ago. A galaxy that had filed us away under extinct and moved on. She thought of all the preparations they'd made, all the scenarios they'd wargamed. None of them had covered this. None of them had prepared for the moment when humanity would have to look the universe in the eye and say, "Reports of our death were greatly exaggerated. Compose a response," Sarah said, her voice finding strength. "Tell them the truth. Tell them who we are, where we came from, and how we survived. Tell them," she paused, a fierce pride burning in her chest. "Tell them that humanity is very hard to kill." As the team scrambled to comply, Sarah looked out at the Earth hanging in the viewport, beautiful, blue-green, alive. A world that had died and been reborn. A world that refused to give up its children without a fight. The galaxy thought we were extinct, but they were about to learn something about humanity that we'd proven to ourselves. In the deepest darkness, we don't go quietly into the night. We claw our way back from oblivion itself, and when we emerge, we bring the fire of renewal with us. The second message was already incoming, and Sarah could see from the analysis that it wasn't alone. Dozens of other civilizations were now focusing on Earth, their attention drawn by the impossible, a voice crying out from a tomb 3,000 years sealed. Humanity had lit the stars again, and the galaxy was waking up to the realization that they'd made a grave mistake. We weren't extinct. We were just getting started. Sarah hadn't slept. None of them had. How could they when humanity's entire future was being rewritten with each decoded transmission? The control room had become a hive of frantic energy, linguists working alongside engineers, xenobiologists theorizing about species they'd never met, and diplomats drafting responses to messages they only half understood. Commander Okoye brought up the latest translations on the central display. "We've identified at least 47 distinct civilizations in the local cluster alone. Most of them are part of something called the Galactic Council. Think of it as a loose confederation of spacefaring species. They've been around for at least 50,000 years, maybe longer, and they all think we're dead," Marcus added, highlighting a series of archived transmissions. "Not just dead, cataloged, filed, and forgotten. Earth is officially designated as Graveworld Terra 3 in their records. The survey that declared us extinct was conducted 3,000 years ago by a species called the Viridians. Their report was thorough. Sarah scanned the translated document that appeared on her tablet. The Viridians had done their homework. Atmospheric analysis showing toxic levels of radiation and greenhouse gases. Orbital surveys revealing ruined cities and industrial wastelands. Spectral analysis of the oceans showing collapsed ecosystems. They'd even detected lingering radioactive isotopes consistent with nuclear warfare. Their conclusion had been inevitable. Civilization designated human failed to survive first contact with atomic energy and industrial-scale environmental modification. Population 0, survival probability 0, recommended action, archive and move on. They weren't wrong, Yuki said quietly. That's the thing that's getting me. Based on what they could see, their analysis was completely accurate. We should have been extinct, but we weren't, Sarah said firmly. And now we need to make them understand how that's possible. The response they'd sent 12 hours ago had been simple: a declaration of identity, a brief history of the fall and the recovery, and a request for peaceful contact. Now they waited to see how the galaxy would react to humanity's resurrection. They didn't have to wait long. The incoming transmission came from a source that identified itself as the Galactic Council's Emergency Response Coordinator. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear enough to make Sarah's blood run cold. Attention Terra 3 inhabitants. Your claim to be the original human species cannot be verified. Graveworld protocols are now in effect. Multiple scenarios are being evaluated. 1. You are an invasive species, occupying a deceased civilization's homeworld. 2. You are artificial constructs created by unknown parties. 3. You are a biological weapon or plague that consumed the original inhabitants. 4. This is an elaborate hoax. Quarantine protocols are being implemented. Do not attempt to leave your solar system. Council security forces are en route. Estimated arrival, 96 standard cycles. Comply or face containment. The control room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped, some angry, some afraid, all of them loud. Sarah let it run for 30 seconds before slamming her hand on the desk. Quiet. The room fell silent. I know we're all feeling this, but panic doesn't help. Okay, what's a standard cycle? Based on the temporal references in their broadcasts, approximately 6 Earth days. So we have roughly 19 months before anyone actually arrives. 19 months to prove we're who we say we are, Marcus muttered. How the hell do we do that? Send them a DNA sample. Show them our baby pictures? Actually, Yuki said slowly, her eyes distant with thought. That might not be as crazy as it sounds. They surveyed us 3,000 years ago. They have data from that survey: atmospheric composition, isotope ratios, maybe even genetic material if they collected any biological samples. We can compare their historical data with our current reality and show the continuity. Sarah felt a spark of hope. You're saying we can prove we're the same species that was here before? More than that, we can show them exactly how we survived. Our genetic databases go back to before the fall. We have geological records, historical documents, cultural artifacts, everything preserved in the deep archives. We can literally walk them through our own extinction event and show them how we crawled back from it. There's another problem, Commander Okoi interjected. While you were all focusing on the Council's response, I've been monitoring the other chatter. Not everyone out there is thrilled about our return. She brought up a new set of transmissions. These ones not directed at Earth but intercepted from broader galactic communications. The translations were fragmentary, but the sentiment was clear. A species called the Corinthians, if humans survived extinction level. Catastrophe. Their biological resilience may pose a contamination risk. The Pelagian hierarchy, a species that recovers from self-inflicted apocalypse, is either incredibly lucky or incredibly dangerous, possibly both. An entity identified only as the Silicon Collective. Historical analysis suggests humans were volatile and aggressive. If authentic, their return requires careful management. They're afraid of us, Sarah breathed. The galaxy is actually afraid of us. Can you blame them? Marcus asked. We're the species that nearly killed ourselves off and came back for round two. From their perspective, we're either unkillable cockroaches or dangerously unstable maniacs. Maybe both. Sarah stood and paced the control room, her mind racing through possibilities and problems. Humanity's return was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a chance to join the galactic community as equals. Instead, they were being treated like a potential plague that needed to be contained. But maybe, she thought, that wasn't entirely wrong. Not the plague part, but the part about being dangerous. Humanity was dangerous, not because we were violent or aggressive, but because we'd done something that apparently no other species in the galaxy had managed. We'd survived our own worst nature. What if, she said slowly, what if that's exactly what we tell them? The room turned to look at her. Think about it. They're afraid because we're an unknown quantity. Fine, let's give them certainty. Let's show them exactly what humanity is capable of, both the destruction and the redemption. Let's lay it all out, every mistake we made, every horror we inflicted on ourselves and our world, and every painful step we took to fix it. Not because we're apologizing, but because we're proving that we learned. You want to show them our scars, Yuki said, understanding dawning in her eyes. I want to show them that our scars healed. The galaxy has probably seen 1,000 species burn themselves out on the Great Filter. Nuclear war, environmental collapse. Singularity's gone wrong, whatever it is that stops most civilizations from reaching the stars. They've seen species fail that test again and again, but they've never seen one pass it the way we did. Commander Okoye was nodding now. We don't just tell them we survived extinction. We show them that we conquered the very things that made us go extinct in the first place. We became the cure to our own disease, exactly. And if the galaxy is afraid of us coming back dangerous and unstable, we prove that we're the opposite. We're the species that faced its own darkness and chose to be better. Marcus pulled up a planning interface. Okay, so we're talking about a comprehensive data package. Complete genetic records showing continuity from pre-fall to present. Geological and atmospheric data proving we're the same species that evolved here. Historical records documenting the fall and recovery. Cultural archives showing continuous civilization. And most importantly, evidence of the changes we made to prevent it from happening again. Can we put that together in 19 months? Sarah asked. We can if we pull everyone in. Every archive, every university, every historical society. This becomes humanity's top priority, proving we deserve to exist. Over the following weeks, Earth mobilized in ways it hadn't since the dark days of the fall. The Beacon Project expanded from a simple message to the stars into a comprehensive presentation of humanity's entire history, the good, the bad, and the catastrophic. Geneticists compiled family trees that stretched back 10,000 years, showing unbroken lineages from ancient humans to the present. Geologists mapped radiation decay patterns and atmospheric recovery that could only result from natural processes over millennia, not sudden occupation. Historians digitized every surviving record from the pre-fall era, including the ones that showed humanity at its absolute worst. That last part was the hardest. There was an instinct to hide the genocides, the wars, the environmental destruction, the casual cruelty that old Earth had inflicted on itself. But Sarah insisted it all going. If they were going to prove they'd learned, they had to show what they'd learned from. The galaxy watched. More civilizations joined the growing audience, drawn by the spectacle of a supposedly extinct species clawing its way back onto the cosmic stage. The chatter was constant now, a background noise of speculation and debate that their translation algorithms struggled to keep up with. Some of it was encouraging. A species called the Arxians transmitted. If their claims are verified, this represents an unprecedented scientific opportunity to study extinction recovery. The Luminari, entities that existed as coherent plasma fields, added, we have never encountered a civilization that survived complete societal collapse. This fascinates us, but there was still plenty of suspicion. The Viridians, whose survey had declared humanity extinct, were particularly vocal. Our instruments were thorough. Our analysis was sound. Either our entire scientific method is flawed, or something else is happening here. And then there was the faction, that worried Sarah most, the ones who weren't suspicious, but excited in a way that made her skin crawl. The Krellian Dominion transmitted, a species that survives apocalypse-level events. Could be extremely valuable. Military applications suggest themselves. The consortium of purchased worlds, resurrection technology, survival adaptation techniques, whatever enabled human persistence, has significant commercial value. Humanity wasn't just proving it existed. It was advertising capabilities that made it a target. 8 months into the compilation, they received a different kind of transmission. This one came from a single source, not part of the Council's official communications, encrypted in a way that suggested it didn't want other species listening in. The translation was cleaner than most, suggesting whoever sent it had been studying human languages more carefully. You are making a mistake. The galaxy does not reward honesty, it exploits it. By showing your weaknesses alongside your strengths, you invite predation. Some of us remember what humans were before the fall, fractious, territorial, but fiercely independent. If you wish to survive first contact, you must appear stronger than you are, not more enlightened. This is not idealism speaking, it is experience. You will be tested. Be ready. A friend in the dark. The message was unsigned, the source untraceable. Sarah read it 3 times, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the station's temperature control. Could be a trap, Marcus suggested. Someone trying to make us paranoid. Or someone who actually knows how the galaxy works trying to warn us, Yuki countered. We've been assuming that galactic civilization operates on principles of enlightened cooperation. But what if it doesn't? What if it's more like Earth before the fall? Nations pretending to cooperate while constantly maneuvering for advantage. Sarah thought about the Krellian and consortium transmissions. We continue with transparency, she decided. If the galaxy is really as cynical as our mysterious friend suggests, then they'll expect us to hide our weaknesses. By not doing that, we might actually confuse them enough to buy time, or we paint a target on our backs, Commander. Okoye said quietly. We did that the moment we lit the beacon, Sarah replied. Now we just have to hope our bet pays off. The data package was completed with 3 months to spare. It was comprehensive, unflinching, and utterly human. It showed a species that had risen from the trees to split the atom in less than 1 million years evolutionary terms. Barely a heartbeat. It showed that same species nearly annihilating itself through a combination of hubris, short-sightedness, and weapons that made extinction a button push away. And it showed what came after, the desperate survival in the deep warrens, the slow, painful process of rebuilding not just civilization but character, the deliberate choices to change, to be better, to remember that the same intelligence that let us harness fusion could also learn wisdom. It's done, Sarah announced to the assembled staff. Whatever happens next, we've told our story truthfully. The galaxy can judge us based on what we actually are, not what they fear we might be. They transmitted the complete package on all frequencies. A data burst so massive it would take weeks for anyone receiving it to process fully. And then, they waited. The Council security forces were 3 months out now. Long-range sensors showed 7 massive vessels moving through the outer system at speeds that suggested technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved. They weren't attacking, but they weren't friendly either. They were enforcers coming to assess a potential threat. Sarah watched them approach on the long-range displays, feeling the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her shoulders. Everything humanity had survived: the bombs, the poisoned skies, the 8 centuries underground, the slow climb back to the light. It all came down to this. Could they convince the galaxy that they deserved a seat at the cosmic table? Or would humanity's second chance end with quarantine, containment, and eternal isolation? The answer came not from the Council fleet, but from an unexpected source. The transmission bore the identifier of the Arxian dominance, one of the oldest civilizations in the local cluster. Their message was brief: we have reviewed your data. Your genetic continuity is verified. Your historical records are consistent with known patterns of nuclear age collapse. Your recovery methodology is remarkable. We confirm you are human. You are the original inhabitants of Teroth Re, and you have achieved something we have never witnessed. In 50,000 years of galactic observation, the Council will need to convene. There are questions about cultural contamination protocols, technology sharing, territorial boundaries, and 1,000 other bureaucratic concerns. This will take time. But speaking for ourselves, we say this: welcome back. The galaxy is diminished when any voice falls silent. We are curious to hear what yours has to say after 3,000 years of silence. We look forward to meeting you in person. Try not to go extinct again before we get there. Sarah felt something break open in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying so long. She'd forgotten it was there. Around her, the control room erupted into cheers, people hugging, some crying, all of them releasing months of accumulated stress in one explosive moment of relief. They'd done it. Against all odds, humanity had proven itself to the galaxy. But the celebration was cut short by another incoming transmission. This one from the Council fleet itself. The lead ship, identified as the Harmonious Arbitration, transmitted on a tight beam directly to Relay Station Olympus. This is Commander Saurix of the Council Enforcement Division. We have received the Arxian confirmation of your species' identity. However, verification is only the first step. Before humanity can be granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, we must conduct what you would call a cultural compatibility assessment. In simpler terms, we need to see if you've truly learned the lessons you claim, or if you're simply better at hiding your violent tendencies. Prepare to receive a diplomatic delegation. We will be arriving at Terra 3 in 48 hours. I suggest you make ready to impress us. The galaxy has seen species talk about peace and enlightenment before. We're going to find out if you actually mean it. One more thing. There are factions in the Council who believe that any species capable of surviving extinction-level catastrophe represents an existential threat to galactic stability. Your continued independence may depend on proving them wrong. No pressure. The transmission ended, and Sarah stared at the blank screen, her momentary relief evaporating. Well, Marcus said into the silence, at least they're being honest about judging us. 48 hours, Yuki murmured. That's barely enough time to prepare a proper welcome ceremony, let alone convince them we're not a threat. Sarah's mind was already racing. A cultural compatibility assessment. They wanted to see if humanity had really changed, or if we were just putting on a show. They wanted proof that our enlightenment was genuine. How do you prove something like that? How do you show that a species has fundamentally altered its nature, especially when that species is humanity, stubborn, adaptable, and absolutely terrible at following anyone else's rules? We show them Earth, Sarah said suddenly. Not a sanitized version, not a diplomatic facade. We show them the real Earth, the restored forests growing over old battlefields, the cities built on the bones of the ones we destroyed, the memorials to our dead. We show them that we live every day with the consequences of our mistakes, and that we chose to be better anyway. And if they decide that's not enough, Commander Okoye asked, if they determine we're too dangerous to let join the galactic community? Sarah looked out at Earth, hanging in space like a jewel, blue and green and alive despite everything that should have killed it, despite everything we'd done to try to kill it. Then we proved them wrong, she said quietly. Just like we proved wrong everyone who said humanity couldn't survive. Just like we proved wrong the laws of probability that said we should have gone extinct. We've spent 3,000 years earning our second chance. We're not giving it up without a fight. A diplomatic fight, Marcus clarified quickly. Obviously, Sarah said with a slight smile. We're enlightened now, remember? The 48 hours that followed were a controlled hurricane of preparation. Diplomats were briefed, cultural experts consulted, sites selected for visits, speeches written and rewritten. The council delegation would be the first aliens to set foot on Earth, assuming they had feet and humanity had one chance to make a first impression that would determine its future in the cosmos. But beneath the diplomatic preparations, something else was happening. Across Earth, in hundreds of communities, a conversation was taking place. What did it mean to be human? What had they learned in 3,000 years? What did they want to say to the galaxy? The answers came from everywhere. Teachers submitted lesson plans showing how children were taught about the fall, not as ancient history, but as a constant reminder. Artists shared works that incorporated rubble from old Earth, beauty rising from destruction. Scientists explained the ethical frameworks that now governed all their research. The hard-learned rules about what you could do versus what you should do. And ordinary people, farmers and engineers, parents and poets, the millions who made up humanity's second chance, they all had the same thing to say. We're not perfect. We still argue, compete, sometimes fail to live up to our ideals. But we remember what happens when we forget to be human. And that memory makes us better than we were. The Council ships entered Earth orbit exactly on schedule. Massive vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had built. They were beautiful in an alien way, organic curves mixed with geometric precision. Like someone had convinced mathematics to grow instead of being constructed. The delegation that descended to Earth consisted of 7 beings representing 7 species, each one stranger than the last. Commander Salrix was something like a 6-limbed centaur covered in iridescent scales. The Arxian representative existed as a swarm of coordinated insects that moved as one. There was a being made of crystalline structures that communicated through light. Another that looked disturbingly like a terrestrial octopus except for the crown of sensory organs, where its head should be, and 3 others that defied easy description. They landed at the UN complex, built on the site of the old United Nations headquarters in what had once been New York. The building had been reconstructed using rubble from the original, a deliberate choice to show continuity with old Earth. Sarah stood in the delegation receiving them, feeling absurdly small and fragile compared to these beings, who represented civilizations older than human agriculture. But she'd survived the past 19 months. She could survive this too. Commander Salrix spoke first, their translator rendering the sounds into perfect English. We are here to assess your compatibility with galactic civilization. Over the next standard cycle 6 of your days we will observe, question, and evaluate. You may refuse nothing and hide nothing. Any attempt at deception will result in immediate quarantine. Do you accept these terms? Sarah took a breath. We accept. We have nothing to hide. Everything we are, our history, our culture, our achievements, and our failures is open to your inspection. Good. Then let us begin with the most important question. Salrix leaned forward, and Sarah could see something that might have been curiosity in their alien eyes. You nearly destroyed yourselves. You faced extinction and survived through suffering we can barely imagine. You've had 3,000 years to think about what went wrong. So tell us, why should we believe it won't happen again? The question hung in the air, and Sarah felt the weight of humanity's future balanced on her answer. Around the world, billions watched and waited. In the control room above, her team held their breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Sarah thought about the children in the memorial gardens, learning the names of extinct species. She thought about the ethical councils that governed every new technology. She thought about the fact that humanity could have rebuilt nuclear weapons 1,000 times over in the past 15 centuries, but had chosen not to. She thought about her own great-great-grandmother, who had died in the deep warrens never seeing the sun, believing that future generations would use her sacrifice to build something better. And she gave the only answer she could, the truth. You shouldn't believe it, Sarah said clearly. Not on faith alone, because faith is what old Earth had, and faith wasn't enough. They believed in progress, in their own good intentions, in the idea that surely they wouldn't be stupid enough to destroy themselves. She saw surprise ripple through the alien delegation. So we don't ask you to believe. We ask you to verify. Look at our systems, our safeguards, our cultural frameworks. Look how we govern ourselves, how we make decisions, how we handle conflict. Look at what we've built and ask yourself, could this civilization do what the last one did? And if we find weaknesses, Salrix asked, if we find the seeds of another fall, then we want you to tell us, Sarah said. Because we're not perfect. We're humanity, we're brilliant and flawed and still learning. But the difference between us and old Earth is that we know we're flawed. We've built our entire society around that knowledge. We remember what happens when we forget our limitations. She gestured to the building around them. This complex is built from the rubble of the old United Nations. Every day, diplomats walk on stones that once housed the organization that failed to prevent the fall. Every school child on Earth learns what their ancestors did wrong before they learn what we've done right. We don't hide from our history, we live inside it. The Arxian representative moved forward, their swarm body coalescing into a humanoid shape of courtesy, Sarah realized. To make communication easier, when they spoke, it was with a voice like wind through grass. This is not what we expected. Most species either deny their failings or wallow in guilt that prevents growth. You do neither. We can't afford to, Sarah replied. Denial is what killed old Earth. Guilt would kill new Earth just as surely. So we chose option 3, remember, learn, and do better. Commander Salrix made a sound that the translators struggled with. Before settling on contemplative rumble, you will show us this. Your schools, your governments, your decision-making processes, your weapons capabilities and what prevents their use, your conflicts because we know you have them and how you resolve them, everything. Sarah confirmed. Over the next 6 days, the galactic delegation saw humanity with brutal honesty. They visited memorial sites where the names of 8 billion dead were recorded. They sat in classrooms where children debated ethical frameworks. They observed government councils making decisions by consensus rather than power. They toured research facilities where every project had to pass ethical review boards that could, and did shut down promising work if it posed too much risk. They also saw humanity's flaws. They witnessed arguments and disagreements. They found communities struggling with resource allocation, individuals acting selfishly, politicians maneuvering for advantage. They discovered that humans were still humans capable of pettiness, tribalism, and short-term thinking, but they also saw something else. Every time conflict arose, there were systems to handle it. Every time someone tried to game the system, there were safeguards. Every time a dangerous technology emerged, there were frameworks for assessment. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional in a way that suggested genuine change rather than naive idealism. On the 6th day, the delegation gathered for their final assessment. Sarah and the human diplomatic corps sat across from 7 alien beings in a room that had been carefully designed to accommodate species with wildly different environmental needs. Commander Salrix spoke for the group. We have conferred. We have observed. We have tested your claims against observable reality, and we have reached a conclusion. Sarah felt her heart hammering, but kept her face neutral. Humanity is strange, Salrix continued. You are younger than most species we encounter, but you carry trauma that would cripple civilizations twice your age. You are technologically primitive by galactic standards, but your social engineering is sophisticated in ways that surprise us. You are individually chaotic, but collectively stable, the crystalline being chimed in, its words rendered as clear tones. Most species that survive the great filter do so by luck. They stumble past the dangers without fully understanding them. You survived by dying first and learning from it. This is unprecedented. There are concerns, Salrix said. Your species is resilient in ways that could become problematic. Your history of conflict, even resolved, makes some council members nervous, and your rapid recovery suggests adaptive capabilities that might threaten the galactic status quo. Sarah's stomach clenched. This was at the moment they'd been building toward for 19 months. The moment when humanity either joined the galactic community or was locked away as too dangerous to interact with. However, Salrix continued, and Sarah's heart leaped. We also note that you have done something remarkable. You have transformed trauma into wisdom. You have built a civilization that remembers its failures more vividly than its successes. And most importantly, you have shown us that the great filter is not inevitable. It can be survived, learned from, and overcome. The Arxian representative added, the council will likely debate your membership for years. There will be factions opposing you, others supporting you, and many simply confused by you. This is normal galactic politics. But, Salrix said, and there was something in their voice that might have been approval, we are prepared to recommend provisional contact status. You will be allowed to communicate with other species, engage in cultural exchange, and begin the long process of integration. There will be restrictions on technology transfer, limitations on expansion beyond your solar system, and constant monitoring. But you will not be quarantined. Sarah felt tears threatening and fought them back. They'd done it. Against all odds, humanity had proven itself worthy of a second chance, not just with itself, but with the galaxy. There's one final thing, Salrix said. A question we must ask before we leave anything, Sarah replied. What will you do if it happens again? If despite all your safeguards and wisdom, humanity faces another existential crisis? What if your children's children forget the lessons you've learned? Sarah smiled, and it was a smile that carried the weight of 3,000 years of survival. Then we'll go underground again. We'll wait again. We'll rebuild again. Because that's what humanity does. We survive. We're stubborn that way. And if we have to teach ourselves the same lessons 1,000 times over 1,000,000 years, we will. Because the alternative is giving up. And that's the one thing humanity has never learned how to do. Commander Salrix made that contemplative rumble again. That, they said, is exactly what we hoped you would say. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the same control room where it had all begun, watching a sight she'd only dreamed about. In orbit around Earth, alongside human vessels, hung ships from a dozen different civilizations. The first official embassies were being established, the first cultural exchanges planned, the first tentative steps toward humanity becoming truly galactic. It wouldn't be easy. There would be misunderstandings, conflicts, species that distrusted humanity and humans who feared the aliens. The path ahead was uncertain and dangerous, but then, that had always been true. The only difference was that now, humanity walked it with companions. Marcus joined her at the viewport. You know what's funny? For 3,000 years, the galaxy thought we were dead, extinct, filed away and forgotten. And now they can't stop talking about us. We're interesting, Yuki added, coming up on Sarah's other side. The species that died and came back. The civilization that passed through the great filter by failing it first. We're going to be case studies in xenosociology for millennia. Good, Sarah said. Let them study us. Let them learn from our mistakes so they don't have to make them. That's what we're here for, to be the example that maybe, just maybe, extinction doesn't have to be inevitable. Commander Okoye's voice came over the comm director. We're receiving another message. It's from that anonymous source, the one who warned us about the galaxy. Put it through. The message was brief. You did well. Better than I expected. You showed them your scars and they saw strength instead of weakness. That takes courage. The road ahead will be difficult. The galaxy is not as enlightened as it pretends to be. But you have something most species lack. You've already died once. You know how to survive what kills others. Use that knowledge, guard it, and when the time comes, share it. The galaxy needs humanity more than it knows. Welcome to the stars. Still a friend in the dark. Sarah stared at the message, feeling a chill that wasn't entirely unpleasant. Somewhere out there, in the vast cosmic darkness, someone was watching humanity. Someone who understood what they'd been through and what they'd become. Someone who thought humanity was going to matter. Well, Marcus said after a long silence. That's ominous but encouraging. That's humanity in a nutshell. Yuki laughed. Ominous but encouraging. Sarah looked out at Earth, beautiful, scarred, alive. A world that had died and been reborn. A world that refused to give up, even when extinction seemed inevitable. And she thought about all the humans throughout history who had made this moment possible. The ones who'd survived the fall in the deep darkness. The ones who'd slowly rebuilt in the centuries after. The ones who'd made the careful, deliberate choice to be better than their ancestors. The billions of ordinary people who'd simply decided that humanity deserved another chance. They'd been extinct in the eyes of the galaxy. Dead, buried, and forgotten. But they'd lit the beacons anyway, and in doing so, they'd proven something important not just to the galaxy, but to themselves. Humanity's story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The stars waited, vast and full of wonders and dangers that humanity couldn't yet imagine. But that was all right. They'd faced the unimaginable before, and they'd survived. 5 years later, Earth Galactic Council had never seen anything quite like the human memorial garden. Built at the intersection of 3 shipping lanes, visible from a dozen major trade routes. It hung in space like a crystalline flower, a monument to 8 billion souls, and the civilization they'd built and lost. But it wasn't just a memorial to the dead. It was a warning to the living. Every species that passed through the sector received the same transmission in their own language, adapted to their own biology, translated with care by the growing corps of human xenolinguists. Here lies the first human civilization. It rose from the trees to touch the stars in less than 1,000,000 years. It split the atom, mapped the genome, built wonders that defied imagination. And then it destroyed itself through short-sightedness, greed, and the terrible conviction that surely it wouldn't happen to them. 8 billion people died. A world burned. A species faced extinction. But humanity learned. Humanity survived. And now we share this lesson with the galaxy. The great filter is not inevitable. It can be passed, but only if you recognize it for what it is, not a test of strength or intelligence, but a test of wisdom. The question is not whether you can build weapons that destroy worlds. The question is whether you can build a civilization that chooses not to use them. We failed that test once. We will not fail it again. And we hope that by sharing our story, others might pass it on the first try. Remember the dead, learn from the survivors, and choose wisely. The second human civilization, Ambassador Sarah Chen watched the latest batch of alien dignitaries file through the memorial, their various physiologies expressing emotions she'd learned to read over 5 years of constant contact, sorrow, horror, contemplation, and sometimes most importantly, determination, said Marcus, now head of the human embassy on Council Station 1. When we first lit the beacons, I was terrified. Thought we might be inviting invasion or extinction to point zero, and instead, Sarah prompted, instead we became grief counselors to the galaxy. Marcus laughed, but there was affection in it. Half the species we meet are going through their own crises: environmental collapse, AI risk, bioweapon proliferation, you name it. And they come to us asking, how did you survive yours? Because we're proof it's possible, Sarah said softly. We're the species that went extinct and refused to stay that way. In a galaxy where most civilizations either pass the great filter or die trying, we did both. A new ship was arriving at the memorial, this one from a species called the Viridians. Sarah smiled. The same species that had surveyed Earth 3,000 years ago and declared humanity extinct. They'd been among the most skeptical of humanity's return, convinced it had to be some kind of trick, but lately, they'd been some of humanity's strongest supporters, because the Viridians had their own brush with extinction 5,000 years ago, a plague that had killed 90% of their population. They understood survival. They understood the weight of carrying forward when everyone you knew was gone. Ambassador Chen, the Viridian delegation leader, approached, their translator rendering their speech perfectly now. We wondered if you might spare some time. My government is facing a situation similar to what your ancestors faced. We thought perhaps you want to know how we did it. Sarah finished gently. How we survived the unsurvivable. Yes, Sarah looked at Marcus, who nodded. Then she turned back to the Viridian. We survived by remembering, by refusing to let our dead be forgotten, by building our entire civilization on the foundation of never again, and by accepting that we would never be the same people we were before. She gestured to the memorial, glowing against the stars. Every human alive today carries the weight of 8 billion ghosts. We don't get to forget them. We don't get to move on as if it never happened. We carry them with us every single day, and that weight, that terrible, precious weight, is what keeps us human. The Viridian was silent for a long moment, processing. Then, your species, you turned trauma into identity. Most would call that unhealthy. Most would be right. Sarah agreed. If that's all we were. But we're not just our trauma. We're also our recovery. We're the gardens growing over battlefields. We're the children who laugh without knowing why their great-grandparents built everything underground. We're the constant tension between remembering and living, between honoring the dead and being alive. She paused, then added, your people survived a plague. You understand this already. You're not the same Viridians you were before, are you? No, the Viridian admitted. We are not. Then you already know the answer. You survive by accepting that survival changes you. You rebuild by admitting you can't rebuild what was lost, only create something new that honors it. And you prevent it from happening again by making sure every generation knows the cost of forgetting. The Viridian leader's posture shifted. What Sarah had learned was their equivalent of a respectful bow. We will remember this. Thank you, Ambassador. As the delegation departed, Marcus leaned against the viewport. 5 years ago, we were the ones asking the galaxy for acceptance. Now they're coming to us for wisdom. That's weird. That's humanity, Sarah corrected. We turned our greatest failure into our greatest strength. The galaxy has species that never fell, that pass the great filter cleanly. But they don't know how to help the ones who are falling. We do, her communicator chimed. Commander Okoye's voice, Sarah, you need to see this. We're getting signals from the far side of the galaxy. Really far, almost 60,000 light years out. Someone just lit their version of the beacon network. Sarah's heart skipped. Another emerging civilization? That's the thing, they're not emerging. According to the preliminary translations, they were advanced, spacefaring, part of an ancient galactic network we've never heard of. And then something happened. Their entire civilization collapsed 3,000 years ago. Sound familiar? They went extinct too, Sarah breathed. And now they're back. They're calling out to the galaxy, just like we did, probably expecting to be alone. But instead, Okoye paused. Instead, they're going to hear from us. From humanity. The one species in the galaxy that can honestly say, we understand exactly what you've been through. Sarah looked out at the memorial, at Earth visible in the distance, at the ships from a dozen species moving through space in patterns that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. She thought about the anonymous message that had warned them about the galaxy, the voice that had said humanity would matter more than it knew. Maybe this was what they'd meant. Maybe humanity's purpose wasn't to be the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. Maybe it was to be the species that knew how to come back from the dead, the ones who could reach out to other survivors and say, you're not alone. We made it through. You can too. Get me a comm channel, Sarah said. Widest possible broadcast. And pull up everything we know about resurrection protocols. Resurrection protocols? Marcus asked. Sarah smiled. It's what we're calling the diplomatic framework for contacting post-extinction civilizations. Because apparently, we're going to need one. If there are 2 species that survived extinction in this galaxy, there might be more. And they need to know they're not the only ones who clawed their way back from oblivion. She pulled up a draft message, choosing her words carefully. To the civilization of coordinates, we received your beacon. We understand your confusion, your fear, your desperate hope that you're not alone. You are not alone. We are humanity. 3,000 years ago, we nearly destroyed ourselves. Our world burned. Our civilization fell. We died by the billions. By all reasonable measures, we should be extinct, but we survived. We rebuilt. And 5 years ago, we lit our own beacons and discovered a galaxy that had written us off as dead. We know what you're going through. We know the weight of being survivors. We know the fear that you might be the last of your kind. The terror that your mistakes might be irreversible. The desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, you can make it mean something. You can. The galaxy will be surprised by you, just as they were surprised by us. They will question whether you're real, whether you're the same species that fell, whether you're dangerous. Let them question. Answer with truth. Show them your scars and your healing in equal measure. And know this, whatever happens, you have allies. You have friends who understand. Because we've walked the path you're walking now. And we're still here. Welcome back to the stars. We can't wait to meet you. Sarah sent the message, knowing it would take weeks to reach its destination, longer still for a response to return. But it would get there. And somewhere, 60,000 light years away, a species that thought it was alone would learn otherwise. Marcus read over her shoulder and whistled softly. You know what this means, right? If there are 2 post-extinction species, there could be dozens, hundreds even, all of them thinking they're unique, that no one else could possibly understand what they've been through. And now they'll have each other, Sarah said. A network of survivors, species that learned the hardest lessons and live to tell about them. A club nobody wants to join. But once you're in, you're never really alone again. Okoye added over the comm. Exactly. Sarah looked out at the stars, seeing them differently now. How many of those distant lights were survivors? How many species had fallen and risen again, thinking themselves alone in their resurrection? How many ghosts haunted the galaxy, waiting for someone to remember them? Get me everything we have on post-extinction recovery protocols, Sarah ordered. Medical, psychological, sociological, technological, all of it. If we're going to be the galaxy's grief counselors, we better have our materials ready, on it. Okoye confirmed, though I should mention the council is already fielding requests. Apparently, The signal from the far side civilization has other species nervous. They're asking if there are more human situations out there that they don't know about. Sarah laughed, and it was only slightly bitter. Human situations. Is that what we're calling extinction events now? Could be worse, Marcus said. Could be calling us the unkillable plague species like that one Krellian faction wanted. Fair point. Sarah sobered, thinking about the responsibility they were taking on. Okay, tell the council we're happy to coordinate, but make it clear, any post-extinction species we make contact with gets treated with respect and autonomy. They're not lab specimens or threats to be managed. They're survivors, and survivors deserve dignity. Sending that now. You know, 5 years ago, you were terrified about first contact. Now you're giving the Galactic Council ultimatums. 5 years ago, we were begging for acceptance. Now we're the experts on something nobody else understands. Things changed, things did change. Over the following months, humanity's role in the galaxy shifted from novelty to necessity. 3 more post-extinction species were identified. One had been hiding in their home system for millennia, afraid to announce themselves. Another had collapsed so completely they'd regressed to pre-industrial technology, and only recently recovered. A third had survived by uploading themselves into artificial substrates, emerging as digital consciousnesses that the galaxy had dismissed as AI. Rather than the remnants of biological civilization, each one thought they were alone. Each one carried the weight of billions of dead and the guilt of survival. Each one needed someone who understood and humanity. Scarred and rebuilt and still figuring out its place in the cosmos, stepped into that role with a fierce protectiveness that surprised even themselves. The Survivors Network, as it came to be called, started informally, just humanity reaching out to species that had walked through fire. But it grew. Support groups formed, cultural exchanges, technology sharing specifically focused on preventing extinction events. A whole new field of study emerged, resurrections and sociology. The study of how civilizations recover from collapse. And at the center of it all was a simple truth that humanity had learned in the deep darkness. Beneath Earth, you are not alone. You are not broken. You survived, and that means something. 10 years after the beacons first lit, Sarah stood in the council chamber, a vast space that accommodated hundreds of species, each in their own environmental zones, all connected by translation systems that turned chaos into conversation. She was here to present humanity's petition for full council membership. They'd been provisional members for a decade, proven themselves peaceful, shown they could work with dozens of different species. By all standard measures, they should be approved without question. But this was the Galactic Council, and nothing was ever simple. The human application for full membership is problematic, said Counselor Vrex of the hierarchy of silent thought. Not because of anything they've done, but because of what they represent. Sarah kept her expression neutral. They'd been expecting resistance. Please elaborate. Counselor, she said formally. Vrex's thought patterns rippled through the translation matrix. Humanity has become a symbol to post-extinction species. They see you as proof that resurrection is possible. This is causing instability. Species that were content to remain in isolation are now announcing themselves. Civilizations that had accepted their reduced circumstances are demanding support for recovery. You have inadvertently given hope to the hopeless, and this is problematic. Sarah asked carefully, it is disruptive. Another counselor interjected, a being whose name translated to something like Keeper of Stable Harmonies. The galaxy had established equilibrium, each species in its place, each civilization understanding its limitations. Your resurrection and the network you've created threatens that balance. Sarah felt anger flare but suppressed it. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Not just humanity's membership, but the question of what the galaxy would be, with respect. Counselor, she said, choosing each word like placing stones across a river. That equilibrium was purchased with the lives of species you dismissed as extinct. Civilizations you wrote off as failures. Billions, maybe trillions of individuals whose deaths you accepted as inevitable. The great filter is a natural process, Keeper insisted. Most species fail to pass it. This is simply the reality of the universe. It was our reality too, Sarah said. We failed the great filter. We died. By your own records, by your own surveys, we were extinct, dead and buried and forgotten. She paused, letting that sink in. But here's what you didn't account for. Some failures don't stay failed. Some deaths aren't permanent. And some extinct species refuse to stay in the graves you dug for them. She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth before, during, and after the fall. Then she added the other survivor network species, each one showing similar patterns of collapse and recovery. You're right that we're disruptive, because we proved that the great filter isn't inevitable, that extinction doesn't have to be permanent, that with time, determination, and a refusal to give up, species can come back from the dead. But at what cost? Vrex challenged. You carry trauma that shapes everything you do. You live haunted by ghosts. Is that truly survival, or just prolonged dying? Sarah smiled, and it was genuine. You want to know if the cost was worth it? Look at us. We're standing in the Galactic Council chamber, speaking for a network of survivors that didn't exist a decade ago. We've shared knowledge that's prevented 3 potential extinction events in other species. We've built bridges between civilizations that had nothing in common, except the experience of nearly dying. She met Vrex's incomprehensible gaze steadily. Yes, we're haunted. Yes, we carry trauma. But we've turned that trauma into wisdom, and we're sharing it with anyone who needs it. So you tell me, Counselor, what's the cost of letting species die when they could be saved? The council chamber fell silent. Sarah could feel the weight of hundreds of species watching, judging, deciding. Finally, the High Coordinator spoke, an ancient entity that rarely involved itself in routine matters. The human raises a point that cannot be ignored. We have long accepted the Great Filter as immutable law, but laws that cannot be questioned become prisons. The Coordinator's presence filled the chamber, and Sarah realized with awe that she was witnessing something rare, a fundamental shift in galactic thinking. Humanity will be granted full council membership, the Coordinator declared, not despite their disruption of galactic equilibrium, but because of it. They have shown us that what we accepted as natural law was merely accepted. And acceptance without question is not wisdom, it is stagnation. Furthermore, the Coordinator continued, the Survivors Network will be recognized as an official council organization. Their work is vital. Too many species have been lost because we accepted their extinction as inevitable. If humanity and their allies can prevent even one such loss, their disruption will have been worth any instability it causes. Sarah felt tears threatening, but maintained her composure. They'd done it. Humanity had gone from extinct to full council membership in a single decade. But the Coordinator wasn't finished. However, the council imposes one condition. Humanity must accept the responsibility they have claimed. You will be the shepherd species, the ones who watch for civilizations approaching the Great Filter, who reach out to those who have fallen, who remind the galaxy that extinction is not inevitable. This is not an honor, it is a burden. Do you accept? Sarah thought about the 8 billion dead beneath Earth's soil, about the 15 centuries spent underground, waiting for a world to heal, about every species in the Survivors Network who had walked through their own hells and emerged scarred but alive. We accept, she said, because nobody should face extinction alone, and nobody who survives should have to rebuild alone. That's what humanity learned in our darkest hour. That's what we're here to share. The council voted, and the decision was unanimous, perhaps the first unanimous decision in council history. Humanity was in, not as junior members or provisional guests, but as full participants in galactic civilization. With a mission that was uniquely theirs, they would be the ones who remembered the dead, who reached out to the dying, who refused to accept extinction as inevitable. They would be the shepherds. 50 years later, Sarah Chen was old now, her body finally starting to show the weight of decades spent bridging the gap between humanity and the cosmos. But her eyes were still sharp as she stood in the Survivors Memorial Station. What had begun as a simple monument had grown into a vast complex, half museum and half embassy, where representatives from 47 post-extinction species worked together. 47. They'd found 47 civilizations that had faced the Great Filter and survived. Some had been hiding for millennia. Others had fallen and risen so recently their wounds were still raw. Each one thought they were alone until humanity found them. Until humanity said, "We understand. we survived too. You're not alone anymore." A young human intern approached someone who'd never known anything but humanity. As a galactic species, who'd grown up thinking of aliens as neighbors rather than legends. "Ambassador Chen, there's someone here to see you. They say they won't explain. They just asked for you specifically." Sarah followed the intern to a private meeting room, curious. Very few beings in the galaxy had the clearance to request private audiences with the head of the Survivors Network. The figure waiting for her was unlike any species she'd encountered, if it was a species at all. It seemed to exist partially out of phase with normal space, like a shadow that had learned to be solid. "Ambassador Chen," the being said, and Sarah's breath caught. She knew that voice, not from hearing it, but from reading it in text. Again and again over 50 years. "You're the friend in the dark," she said. "The one who warned us about the galaxy. Who told us we'd matter. I am one of them," the being confirmed. "There are many of us, watchers, guides, species that passed beyond the great filter so long ago that were barely considered biological anymore. We exist in the spaces between, observing, occasionally nudging, rarely interfering. Why reveal yourself now?" The being shifted, and Sarah got the impression of something like a smile. "Because you succeeded beyond what we'd hoped. When we found you, humanity crying out from a world we'd marked as dead, we were surprised. In our long existence, surprise is rare. You knew we'd survived. We knew something had survived, but we didn't know if it was humanity or something wearing humanity's skin. So we watched, we warned, we waited to see what you would become, and you became exactly what the galaxy needed. Shepherds for the lost, advocates for the dying. Proof that the great filter is not inevitable." The being moved closer. "There are older species than mine in this galaxy. Powers that make the Council look like children playing at politics. Some of them have been watching your Survivors Network with interest." Sarah felt a chill. Good interest or bad interest? Both. Some see potential, others see threat. But all of them see something they haven't seen in a million years: active resistance to the great filter. Species not just surviving it, but helping others survive it. The being produced something, a data crystal that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Sarah's eyes could properly process. "This contains information, coordinates to civilizations that are approaching their filter moments, technology that might help them pass safely, warnings about great filter events we've observed. We're giving it to you because you're the only species in the galaxy that will use it to save others rather than exploit them." Sarah took the crystal carefully. "Why us? Why humanity?" "Because you died," the being said simply. "Because you failed the test and came back anyway. Because you really know what's at stake. Every other species that passes the great filter thinks they were smart or strong or destined to survive. It was luck and stubbornness and refusing to accept death as final." The being began to fade. "The galaxy is entering a difficult period. Great filters are appearing more frequently. We don't know why, but species will need guides who understand what they're facing. They'll need shepherds." "Wait," Sarah said. "Who are you, really?" The being paused, almost fully transparent now. "We were called many things, but in your language, the closest translation would be the first survivors. We failed our great filter 40 million years ago, and we've spent the time since trying to ensure others don't have to walk that path alone." "You're like us," Sarah breathed. "You went extinct and came back. We all did, Ambassador. Every species you'll find in the higher realms of existence, we all died first. The only species that transcend are the ones that learned humility through extinction. It's the final lesson of the great filter. You don't pass it by being strong enough to survive. You pass it by being wise enough to rebuild." And then the being was gone, leaving Sarah alone with a data crystal that held the fate of species not yet born. Sarah stood in the memorial garden aboard the station, looking at Earth through the viewport. Beautiful, scarred, alive. She thought about the journey humanity had taken from the ashes of nuclear fire to the depths of the Earth, to the heights of galactic civilization. She thought about the 8 billion who died so that later generations could learn. She thought about every survivor in the galaxy who carried similar burdens. And she thought about all the species that would face their great filters in the years To come, who would stand at the edge of extinction and have to choose, give up or adapt, die or transform, accept the end or claw their way back from it. They wouldn't face it alone. Not anymore. Because humanity was here, scarred and stubborn and absolutely refusing to let anyone else die the way we did. The galaxy thought we were extinct, but we lit the beacons again, and in doing so, we became something more than survivors. We became the light in the darkness, the voice that says, hold on, fight back, survive. We became hope. And hope, as humanity had proven beyond all doubt, is the hardest thing in the universe to kill. We are humanity. We died once. We refuse to do it again. And we'll be damned if we let you die either. Official motto of the Survivors Network.